video, and of course, at the top of the hour, or the minute, or the second, you heard the theme song, Brand New, by Pizzas, which I heard a rumor about him.
Really?
That he actually created Daft Punk.
You see, I can hear the influences. I think that's something pretty easy to go on, yeah.
Yeah.
Is he French?
Maybe. I'll have to look into
Maybe
that.
he's more than French.
Maybe he's all languages. Anyways, today we're talking about adult cartoons.
Now, we're going to be specific about this. We are specifically talking about cartoons developed here in America, displayed in a North American market, that was designed specifically for people ranging from the age of about 18 upwards.
Yeah.
So specifically designed for that. We're trying to make a differentiation between things like Disney films, which are, all ages.
But let's talk about that for a second.
Okay.
I was looking earlier when I was doing some research for this. I looked and I saw a list called the top 25 adult cartoons. I thought, well, this is a great resource. I can look at these and see what in general adult cartoon is.
Where we're going to go.
First thing on that list is a cartoon on the Disney Channel called Gravity Falls.
Which is an interesting aspect to play on, because in this we get to an aspect that's pretty common in animation now, is the idea that something that's produced specifically geared sort of in the production room towards a specific age range can actually envelop all age ranges. And you see this a lot, actually, particularly in these days, specifically with the advent of the internet. Now we have the huge Adventure Time fan base. We have the Bronies.
Yeah.
This is coming about all of the accumulation, particularly because we grew up during one of the renaissances of animation.
Yeah,
we got some
big
of
boom
the
period.
really, really good animation coming out of the grapevine when we were, just little tykes.
Yeah, but that's the thing, though. People that are fans of it and people that respect stuff like this, they consider those adult cartoons.
Yeah.
Which, I gotta say, they aren't. They are not adult cartoons.
It depends upon how you're looking at it. From an aspect of something that adults can enjoy, yeah, you can go ahead and say they're adult
That's
cartoons.
not an adult cartoon. That's the general audience
But
cartoon.
we're looking at particularly what the show is designed specifically to be referential to.
Yeah.
Like how, The Simpsons
Yeah.
is an adult cartoon. Now, I grew up with a bunch of people who watched Simpsons growing up. I wasn't one of them. My mom was kind of picky about what I watched. But, I know a lot of kids who grew up watching that show. But that show was rife with adult humor. Content we wouldn't typically allow to be in kids' media. Sex, drugs, political atmospheres, things of that nature.
Yeah.
Stuff that you don't present to children. That's what defines it as an adult show.
Exactly.
Is the market that it's established for.
Yeah. So, I guess with most stuff that we talk about, we have to start at the beginning. What do you think what would you consider the first adult cartoon?
That's kind of hard to say.
Because when you go back in history, during the early days of animation, there's a really, even more than today, there's a big gray period where animation was a new thing.
Well, yeah,
in the 20s.
It didn't really have a genre to define, except that it was stuff that wasn't filmed, that was physical.
Yeah.
It was animation was anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, you could do anything with it, and there weren't any set definitions on the genre of what was kids entertainment, what was adult entertainment, what was in the middle, what was general entertainment. When Snow White, the very first feature-length animation film, happened, that was the only genre at the time, was just general entertainment.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really, I think, until around the time that we began to see cartoonists like Ralph Bakshi and the like come forward that we began to get adult entertainment. Now, you saw a bit of it happening.
Well, I would say even before that, though, because you have the Betty Boop cartoon.
Exactly, the Betty Boop, and and even a little bit later, the Tex Avery,
yeah,
and the Looney Tunes, which is rife with sexual jokes.
I think that was one of the first primetime cartoons too.
Yeah, it was actually. We had a lot of it going on at the time. You had the Flintstones, the Jetsons. Those came. The Flintstones was really early.
Yeah.
Them and the Jetsons kind of went into the next generation, but you didn't begin seeing these heavily sexual and kind of almost hidden animations until you get into, I'd say, probably between the 50s and the 70s. Kind of right in that gap is when it really starts to kind of bloom,
Yeah.
Now, it wasn't until the late 80s, early 90s that we got one of the defining cartoons of the genre.
Yeah, which late 90s was the premiere of The Simpsons. Not long after, you have The Critic.
You have The Critic. You had Beavis and Butthead.
Premiered during the mid-90s.
Yeah. Which was actually on a whole new channel that was trying to gear towards teenagers, but that's right in the age range of what they were really going for.
Exactly.
There's people who would enjoy that kind of humor and that kind of view.
Simpsons, I think, even though it is not the first adult cartoon by any stretch of the
imagination, no.
it was one of the first ones that didn't go by a cartoon-like aspect.
Yeah.
It didn't define itself as cartoon like stuff like Cool World did, like Who Framed Roger Rabbit did, or Betty Boop cartoons, or stuff like that.
Well, I mean, and this was the cliches of animation at the time. They were well defined during the the Merry Melodies, the Betty Boop, the Tex Avery phases. These wild things that displayed things that couldn't happen in real life. You draw a hole in the wall and you color it, and then you reach through it and grab something. Simpsons didn't do that. It kind of does it occasionally to poke fun at animation, but for the most part, it's meant to represent although exaggerated, relatively realistic world setting.
Yeah, it's a show about or at least when it started, it was a show about a low-income family that were just trying to make it.
And I think this is one of the things that really helped to make it, a mainstream show, is that technically it's a show you could have filmed live action.
Yeah. And
you wouldn't have required any real rewrites in it. The reason that it was done in animation is because that's how The Simpsons had come to be after being just basically filler material on the Tracy Ullman show.
Yeah, it's almost especially during the time, it's an animated representation of the shows that were on in the previous decades that were live action. The sitcom family show.
Yeah.
In those there were the kids focused ones. There's the Cosby Show. Mm-hmm. There's Full House was 90s. What was earlier?
Full House, though, is a pretty good example of what was going on at that time, because that kind of straddled onto that thing kind of towards the end. It was kind of the last ember to go out. Almost.
Yeah, but I'd say it probably got a lot of its inspiration from stuff like All in the Family.
They heavily reference that kind of stuff. You got All in the Family, the Andy Griffith Show.
Yeah, definitely.
Just basically all kinds of sitcoms that came from right about the 40s onwards, when modern television had come into the home, is kind of what they were drawing from.
So, because of what it did, in the fact that it was at first a very down-to-earth cartoon show, it didn't have a laugh track set off. It which was different from a lot of the family-related shows at the time, which were all filmed before a live studio audience.
Obviously, you couldn't film these painstaking animations.
But because of that.
Live studio audience.
Because of that, it was basically a animated sitcom, but they could deliver jokes much quicker and go through dialogue much quicker because they didn't have to wait for
They didn't have to wait for anybody.
Yeah.
They weren't trying to pander to an immediate audience that was right there. They were putting it on TV. People liked it, so be it. And you can kind of see that they didn't really know how to deal with it at first, because if you watch the first season of The Simpsons, it's not really funny.
It's interesting.
It's not a bad show, but it's highly different from what became so popular about it, specifically in the second season, is when the humor aspect of it really took off.
Yeah. And even though it was more down to earth, that didn't mean that they didn't do comedic stuff.
Of course.
And being a cartoon, they were allowed to kind of reach beyond the bounds that an a live action
cartoon would watch, where they talk about how that one joke about Itchy and Scratchy, where it says, "Oh, Bart, cartoons don't have to be completely 100% accurate all the time," and Homer's sitting on the couch with them, but then another Homer walks by the window. Yeah, they could do this kind of stuff.
And one of the most famous gags in it is famous early gags is the jumping the gorge, where Homer misses, falls down the entire gorge. And we see every single hit that he takes. Yeah. They pull him up, and then he falls out of the back of the ambulance and does it again. You can't do that in live action.
It just wouldn't. It would be incredibly difficult to shoot, and it would put your actors at a huge amount of risk.
Yeah, but it's cartoon.
Which they eventually ended up parodying in the Simpsons behind the scenes thing.
I do remember that.
But this show really set the kind of the pace for it. It defined the genre of what we consider primetime American adult animation.
Yeah.
And there's so many that have come up within the ranks to try to fill in with it. We have Mission Hill, The Critic, Family Guy, American Dad, Futurama.
Exactly, and a lot of those wouldn't exist if it weren't for The Simpsons.
Exactly. And
so, you're saying?
it really is a testament to how putting a show together and sort of analyzing it as it goes by can help define the genre, because all genres out there are ready to be redefined at any point in history. But The Simpsons was the first point.
Yeah.
It was what is it? Ground Zero.
Yeah.
It was ground zero for primetime adult animation.
Yeah. Oh, ground zero, yeah. Because you're coming from the Looney Tunes Simpsons.
Exactly.
Which seems to be every couple of decades you get a rebirth of kind of an animation.
Well, and we got it, oddly enough, again, late 1990s, early 2000s with Family Guy.
Yeah.
Which sort of rejuvenated the aspect of it being something other than The Simpsons that was just the primetime animation.
Yeah. We have a question from our audience.
Yeah. It was more like, would you say maybe like the redefining one for this generation, like you said, Looney Tunes, then came Simpsons. Would you say maybe like something like Adventure Time that has sort of episodes that are very adult themed?
I would not say that anything in Adventure Time is specifically... I wouldn't say anything in Adventure Time is specifically adult themed. That's actually... I want to visit that subject again.
Yeah, we're going to actually come back to that later.
Yeah.
Just begin talking about Adventure Time and regular show, things that began more adult and then eventually...
But I mean, like, if you listen to what some of the stuff, I'm pretty sure J.G. Quintel's the guy who made Radio Show, right?
Yeah.
He talks about The Simpsons being a huge influence.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And Butthead.
And you can see it in
That's
it.
what he watched, to come up with the Mordecai and Rigby's, like, dynamic.
Yeah. And we're going to come back to that later.
But I guess with stuff like this, when people talk about cartoons, especially politicians talk about cartoons, they talk about the fact that cartoons are for children.
Yeah.
So let's just go basic question. Why do adult cartoons exist? Why should they exist?
Oh, because animation, like anything else, is just a media. It's a platform through which a person can funnel ideas and refine them and present them. I mean, you can express the same amount of depth and intricacy in animation as you can in a Kubrick film or a Beatles song. It's not really... There's no limitations to what you can express via animation. And I think particularly a lot of people who grew up, in the time of the Flintstones or Scooby-Doo or Betty Boop, kind of latched onto that sort of nostalgic aspect, and that's when adult animation began, because they were like, I want to take this medium that I enjoyed so much as a kid, but I want to express my perspective through it. And that's where adult animation really became a thing, because animation in the beginning was something that everybody watched.
Yeah.
But obviously the people who get old they're dead. They can't express their own kind of perspective through it.
Another question from our audience.
Actually, it's more of a comment, but you guys already covered it. It was how sort of this stuff is something like animation allows you to push the envelope, and it's something that you can't do. So that's why you need to have that adult cartoon, because you can put in stuff that you can't do with a live action or other types of media. Because, I mean, this is something that you can show. You can also pull in those other aspects like music and stuff, and you can really just push the envelope of animation that you can't do with something like in a live action. Yeah, you can add the music, but a character can't do certain things that a character in a cartoon
of course,
could.
And that's the point of picking your genre, finding something that works for you. Like if you're a pianist, you don't want to write a song for flute.
Yeah,
because it's not going to work with your sensibilities.
Yeah, but why? So let's go on the opposite side of that. Why do you think people classify cartoons as a kid thing?
This may sound a bit like a weird political statement, but I think a lot of it comes from the fact that adults are kind of overly worked. TV was a new thing back then. It was very easy to kind of sit children in front of something and get to work. And we still have that going on today. The idea that this secondary influence in your house becomes an educator and sort of a soul raiser.
It's even more so, especially with the proliferation of like extra medias that act similar to a television.
Yes, exactly.
You have the computer, you have the handheld devices, you have the game systems.
I think it simply comes down to the fact that kids have a lot of free time and adults don't. So
Yeah.
kids ended up watching more television than adults did.
I'll even go much simpler than that. I think it's because, especially in the earlier days when a lot of TV was black and white.
Mm-hmm.
Even in black and white, regular life was limited to what actually existed.
Yeah.
Cartoons were colorful. Cartoons were vibrant.
Exactly. They were children's imaginations on the screen. They were explosive. You could send a rocket with yourself inside of it off to Mars and speak with the people there, or invent something that's never been physically possible.
But I think people just consider that because kids' things are colorful and vibrant.
Yeah.
But then imagination doesn't end when you're a kid.
Oh, of course not. And you see this happening. It was also much cheaper to produce animation back then, so you didn't have people worrying about producing kids' entertainment that would have this huge budget where we had to build a sound set that looked like the moon or something like that.
Definitely. So let's kind of jump back on the subject we started this with. Cartoons for adults versus cartoons for a general audience.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess really, do you think it's okay to classify a cartoon that is for a general audience, to classify it as an adult cartoon?
No, I don't think it's okay.
So you don't think it's okay that there are cartoons like Adventure Time, Regular Show, to a really extended degree, My Little Pony, and just shows like that, it's not, they aren't adult cartoons.
They're not, because you're building expectations that aren't there. We talked about this when I was talking about how The Simpsons, includes is labeled as adult entertainment because it includes themes that you are not legally allowed to present to people under a certain age.
Yeah.
Adventure Time and My Little Pony and Regular Show aren't like that.
Yeah. They will present subjects that not a lot of children's cartoons will visit.
And they are kind of pushing the envelope and kind of causing a bit of heat from some people by doing that. But the idea is that they're not specifically breaking the taboo.
Yeah.
And it's sort of a social norm. So I guess it's kind of dependent upon where you are, what society you belong to, and how society views that particular cartoon. But it's not a personal opinion. It is a societal basis.
And to kind of sidetrack for a second, one thing I've really noticed, especially in the last few years, because the two big shows are Adventure Time and Regular Show,
and they're great.
Yeah, they're both fantastic.
They're fantastic.
And I love them both. But I've always kind of noticed that Adventure Time will get more controversy in what it presents than Regular Show will.
Yeah. Well, and it's sort of odd. You would think it'd be the other way around, wouldn't you? Because Adventure Time is far off and fantastical. It's this made-up world, this universe that doesn't exist here, where people do things that are completely different than they are here. And Regular Show is full of anthropomorphic animals, but they're people, and they do just as many risque things as they do in Adventure Time. But I think that also goes back to the phenomenon that Regular Show is a big show, but it's still a lot more muted in terms of its popularity than Adventure Time is. Adventure Time is almost like a worldwide phenomenon now. It's a huge thing. And Regular Show is a big thing, but it's something that people don't overextend in terms of how good it is.
Yeah.
So I think that's the main reason why.
Yeah. Grayson, we can't have too many interruptions.
Yeah, no. It's just this is just a thought that you might talk about. There's a huge age difference between the characters in Adventure Time and Regular Show.
Yes, that's
Finn
very
and
good.
Well, other than Jacob, but Finn's 12. Mordecai and Rigby are in their early
I would actually
20s.
say that's not true at all, because the only character that is underage is Finn. Princess Bubblegum.
Everyone else in this world is pretty on par. Yeah.
Yeah, Princess Bubblegum's like 19. Marceline's like 1,000 years old.
Has like a billion because.
But then again, Finn is also the avatar by which we're supposed to impart our experience to the show.
But every other character is an adult.
Yeah.
And Sarah, you're gonna have to yell.
Not true. Flame Princess.
Flame Princess is the only other character.
But she's also a tertiary character.
She's not.
She's one that came in and is sort of also kind of faded out.
Yeah.
She's not considered a core character anymore.
But I was going to say, I was going to sidetrack a section. I already am kind of sidetracking. But yeah, and not even like stuff that in a fantastical world would be all that odd.
Yeah.
It's there's a small controversy that I'm not really going to get into with what was missing that whole episode. I think it was that episode.
No, yeah. It was what was missing.
Not really going to get into that. There's another controversy, not a major one, but it did. Some very conservative people did bring it up. The episode Princess Cookie.
Yeah,
which was
the male cookie that wanted to be a princess.
Yeah,
that seems like something people nitpick. There's a cartoon in Australia called Shizao. It is Shazam, except he dons women apparel whenever he activates.
We
his
have
powers.
that. We have that now.
Exactly.
We have that in Steven Universe.
Yeah,
which is a male magical girl.
Yeah, and I kind of I suppose it is important as to the social political landscape that we have in today's world, but I kind of ignore stuff like that because that seems an awful lot like people using the internet to make something seem bigger than it is. Because the internet is a great tool for exacerbating the smallest little fire into this raging, forest hailstorm.
But
that's the wrong metaphor. I went from fire to rain, but still,
a fiery hailstorm.
There we go.
But one thing I will go ahead and say on that subject, though, is I do think it's good, though, that people are thinking about them as adult cartoon, because that's what I'm saying for a general audience, is that as a general audience, a kid could watch a show and get enjoyment out of it. An adult could watch a show and get enjoyment out of it. A teenager can watch the show. Teenagers who have some of the pettiest interests in the world can watch this show and get enjoyment out of it.
And this is one of the best... We have a manager at my work. His name is Ron. And he watches Adventure Time with his kids. He loves it. When we did our extended theme, he came up 3 days later. He was like, I saw your video. It was really cool. My dad is loving it. But this is one of the almost sort of unexpected side effects of general audience viewer or kids shows that contain some adult humor. Parents are starting to watch shows with their kids.
Which is a fantastic thing.
Is a wonderful thing. And it's really starting to change how parents approach what their kids are exposed to.
Yeah. And that's why shows like Adventure Time, like a regular show, like Amazing Adventures of Gumball, I just said it, Steven Universe.
Yeah.
And that's why shows like that are good. And like we said, we don't agree that they're adult cartoons, but we like that they are cartoons that everybody can enjoy.
Well, and I'll take general audience over adult at any time. It depends upon what mood you're in, but they are specifically they're designed in studios that cater to children.
Yeah,
designed to play at times when kids are off from school and are watching TV, and to impart moral and ethical lessons designed to teach kids this is how you need to interact in the adult world once you get there.
So what I think a lot of this grew from, especially with the proliferation of what is geared towards kids being made for adults, is that we had a period from the late 90s, early 2000s where there were literally, and honestly, I can't even argue it sometimes, there were shows that were geared towards kids that were made for adults.
Yeah.
There are 4 of them that I can think of.
Yeah.
Actually, I have them written right there. Beavis and Butthead.
Yeah.
Ren and Stimpy. Daria is kind of in the middle there. It's more geared towards teenagers.
Yeah, and plus it was an offshoot of another show already.
And one of them that I just thought of that isn't written there is Invader Zim.
Yeah.
And these are shows that, in Beavis and Butthead and Daria's case, they were geared towards teenagers.
Yeah.
They
were geared towards people coming out of that setting of ethical lessons and starting to adapt to the adult world and learn this is how I'm going to interact with people. Yeah. More importantly, this is how I'm going to learn to reserve my judgments on the people that I interact with, which was a big thing, especially in Daria. Yeah. It's the idea of harsh judgment
definitely.
in the adult world.
The ones I can't, I have no fathomability about is how Ren and Stimpy got on the air and stayed on the air for multiple seasons. And the exact same comment for Invader Zim.
Dude. Just everybody was doing drugs. Just really high grade, just really good drugs.
My favorite joke about how Invader Zim got on the air is I was also listening to some people talk about it. It's like, here's how I envision Invader Zim got on the air. They had all the shows laid out on the table. They're about to pick one, and then a bird flew in the room and just mixed up all day birds. It's like we have 3 minutes to pitch a show. Pick one, And there's this one called Invader Zim. Who made it? The guy who made Johnny the Homicide Maniac. Okay, whatever.
They'll never approve it. Let's go. I love that, actually. So now we have a great story for the beginning of Invader Zim and the end of Invader Zim, which you should check out, but we'll talk about that some other day.
Some other day where we have no more qualms about what we say.
Oh, God. But yeah, Ren and Stimpy, dude, that was... Because that was, even at the time of The Simpsons...
Yeah, that was
the show.
That was John K?
That was the SpongeBob of its time.
Yeah.
Which was a whole other aspect.
Yeah, and they had no qualms about it being an adult show either. After it went off the air, it came back on Spike TV as the Ren and Stimpy adult hour, I think.
Not to mention a box set of all the banned episodes, which there were tons of.
Yeah.
But that Ren and Stimpy, I honestly think the guy who created it was just madly detached from reality and the idea of the social interplay of taboos.
I think his name is John K.
Yeah.
And the only other thing I know him for is that he made a music video for Weird Al.
Yeah, for Weird Al.
That's it. That's all I know him for. And that his animation style is very similar to another guy. That
it was Close But No Cigar, wasn't it?
Yeah, Close But No Cigar. And his animation style is very similar to the animator on Something Awful.
Well, and you know, you go into a studio, and like a Simpsons studio is a bunch of professional people sitting around a table going, okay, this is the part where the coconut falls on his head, and everybody laughs, and then we play the next joke where Homer sees something he likes and drools. And then you have John Kay in a cave with like a barely functioning light switch just scribbling these mad drawings, and it's gold.
Yeah.
And it's very different to how that show became a success. Now, it's no question when you watch it, the show has quality. It has comedic timing down to a craft, to an art that you don't see much elsewhere. But it was basically just him throwing stuff at the wall.
And we mentioned Beavis and Butthead earlier. I wonder if our audience can help us out by looking something up for us. Who made Beavis and Butthead and King of the Hill?
I'm on a game.
Oh, King of the Hill. It was the same guy, wasn't it? It was
this guy made Office Space and the
Judge.
Yeah,
Mike
Judge.
Judge. And that's the thing. He went from making a cartoon for like teenagers and kids, and the next project he worked on that was a TV show was
King of the Hill, which is Beavis and Butthead is like an Adderall trip. Yeah. Like even the characters are constantly moving and shaking. Yeah. And King of the Hill is just like
it's very calm.
You just had a cup of coffee.
And
you're just coming out of it. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, though. We talk about Simpsons early on was about a very low income family and just being them. By the time King of the Hill came around, which was like 1998,
right around there,
Simpsons had started to become a cartoon.
Yeah.
Before it was an animated show about a middle income family. By that point, they had started to go to like Japan and Africa. It had
become too sitcom-y. They jumped the gorge.
Yeah,
and this is that's one of the serious arguments about the series detractors is that how in later years there's a kind of a steady decline.
Yeah, a lot of people, and I guess we've talked about this a little bit. A lot of people will say that the golden years of Simpsons is from not even season 1, season 2 to season 10.
Yeah, and some people even go as far to say it's that you stop at season 8. But I personally think from season 10 is where it goes, because that's after that season is when most of the head writing staff left.
Yeah,
to work on other stuff.
Yeah, Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein were showrunners at that point, and I think by the year 2000, which is I think right when season 11 started, I think they had left.
Well, they were working on Futurama.
They started working on Futurama, and then they left Futurama for a little while to work on Mission Hill, and then they came back to Futurama after that. Which I love Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein. I think they're very creative.
They're not only helping to define the adult animation movement, they're keeping it steady as it goes along.
Yeah, and I think they're very underrated when it comes to a lot of the.
Oh, definitely. Well, I mean, who's the god of adult animation right now? Seth MacFarlane,
who came from another person who came from kids animation.
He invented Johnny Bravo, guys. I don't know if anybody knows this. Seth MacFarlane he invented Johnny Bravo.
That's
He's the
very
reason that
cool.
character exists.
I love that show.
It's great, isn't it?
It's
Yeah.
He got to start working at Hanna-Barbera. He wrote for Dexter's Laboratory. He wrote for. He wants to redo the Flintstones because it was one of the big influences in his life, and it's one of the reasons he works at Hanna-Barbera.
That's an odd one to want to redo, though. I personally,
It's one of the classics that started animation as a real game changer, and Seth MacFarlane loves getting his hands on stuff.
Yeah, so
For better or for worse.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
he
my-
has made quite a few good things.
and one of my favorite shows that got canceled, I think a little too early, was Mission Hill.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and Mission Hill, I like to compare Mission Hill to Code Monkeys, which is a very underrated show that was on G4 about game programmers. It was animated in 8-bit style like old games from the 80s, which is when the show takes place. I like to compare Mission Hill to Code Monkeys in that Code Monkeys got 2 seasons and then it was canned. And it's the only thing Adam LaPena has done that has been of any real quality,
Yeah.
unfortunately. No offense to the guy. I love Code Monkeys.
But to show that as it ended, you can pretty definitively say, I'm okay with this.
Yeah,
I'm okay with this ending.
I wouldn't hate having more of it, but it's been as good as it needs to be. Mission Hill wasn't like that. Like, every episode was really golden in and of its own, but you wanted more from it because it was so different. The colors, it was a Nickelodeon show for adults, particularly when you come to the color scheme. It was very Klasky Supo, which I think, did they have a hand in it at any point?
I can't be sure. Can someone look that up for us?
What is it?
Mission Hill, did Klasky Supo have any help? The people that made Rugrats, because the animation styles are very similar in terms of how they play with color, or how the differentiation between the lines and the fill color.
Same animators?
I'm wondering if it's the same studio.
Oh.
Yeah, we're having.
It may not be, but I think one of the things that made Mission Hill so special is that you had all these adult animations that were doing like homages to the Flintstones and the more generally refined art styles. But Mission Hill really paid homage to things like Rugrats and things of that nature that were very kind of off the wall in terms of art style.
She
Okay.
says Castle Rock.
Castle Rock, okay.
Castle Rock, Bill Oakley, Josh Weinstein.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
So it's their home company. So
That's one of the things that I think made it so special, and I really wish we'd gotten more of that because
But
you're not really seeing it.
we kind of
Yes.
went off track a little
Yeah.
bit. But what I was going to say is, by like 1998, Simpsons had become a little more cartoon. Then came in King of the Hill, which brought that exact same concept, but kind of turned it up a bit. Now this is literally a show about a family. There's like no cartoon aspects to it.
Exactly.
You could literally film King of the Hill in live action.
Well, I mean, you look at their animation Bible that Mike Judge and the rest drew it up for it.
An 80-page animation.
Yeah,
Bible.
well, I mean, you gotta have those, especially
Yeah.
for a show that's as controlled as King of the Hill was. And it's literally every episode can happen here on planet Earth.
Yeah, they were very specific about like how water happened. Like if something splashed onto you, it's not just a puddle on your chest. It's you're wearing fabric, so it would sink into the
How
fabric.
grass
and stain it.
lines worked, how many fingers somebody has, and how they used them throughout the day, how Bobby's acting was, everything.
They even talk about and to even go into like this is kind of another aspect about dark cartoons that you can kind of get into with since you're being geared towards adults, towards people that are older. You can put a lot more effort into something, and not to say that you shouldn't ever put effort into something that's for kids. But you'll see a lot with kid shows. They're a lot simpler because kids will not grasp onto aspects.
And that's the idea that we particularly had a problem with that in the 70s and 80s with like the G.I. Joe and Transformers, things that were designed just to sell toys. Is the idea that adults expect kids don't react to quality the same way that we do, so we think that they don't need it.
But what I'm also saying is that it's not exactly a bad thing because there are a lot of shows nowadays that will use the same aspect but differently. Yeah. Back then it was more just we can save a lot of budget by
recycling the same scene over and over again.
But you get shows like Adventure Time, which has very simple animation because it feels useless to add useless details for something that's not going to be noticed. All the characters in all the main characters in Adventure Time can probably be drawn in under an hour.
Well, yeah. Well, and the beautiful thing about that is that Adventure Time it's storytelling. It's really good storytelling, and that allows the story to shine through because you don't have all these guys in the forums going, "Oh man, the art style's so cool. I love how they deal with the frame rate and the turn ratios.
Yeah.
It's like Disney animation." You don't have that. You have people discussing the story and how it impacted them, because that's the only thing that's worth focusing on it.
But I was going to say with King of the Hill, because you can make a lot more like detailed stuff in the animation Bible. When they're talking about backgrounds, they actually talk about a lot of art terms, like when they talk about vanishing point, when you're looking down a street, they don't want you to cheapen the animation the farther you go.
Yeah,
a street will not lose detail from like
from a foot off to a mile off.
Yeah. So when they will like make situations where you're looking down a street, you'll get a vanishing point towards the end. Mm-hmm. You'll get like detail will not be lost until at least like towards the horizon.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you saw they were kind of making a statement, because you saw detractions of that in pretty much everything beforehand, where you'd have like the first few houses in a line would be like fully detailed with lines and everything. And then as you got down, it'd just be like the roof was just a line, no rafters. Blah, 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 blah. And then eventually they're just colors. Yeah,
but in King of the Hill, every house is fully detailed.
Exactly. And it's different, too. Yeah. It's not the same thing over and over again with a different color palette either.
And every tree is a tree.
Yeah.
It's not a lump with a circle around it. Yeah, it's not that. Every tree has leaves and has branches.
Yeah.
You can actually... as long as they
had to watch a lot of Bob Ross, I bet you.
Yeah, I don't know how well they stayed towards the Bible in the show, but I'm betting if you go and watch an episode of King of the Hill right now and pause at any point, the scene will most likely be fully detailed.
Yeah, and it'll be consistent with whatever it is that you're reading in the Bible to see it. Because I'm sure a lot of you aren't studying animation, but when you study animation, you learn how to stop enjoying animation.
Yeah.
Which is something you try to hold on to, but it's pretty easy.
Yeah, it's the same with film.
And that's the same with any medium. I mean, if you want to be a great musician, you have to learn how to analyze music and stop enjoying it.
Yeah.
Now, you want to make sure that you don't go so far that you can't enjoy it anymore, but you have to learn, this is why people like it, this is why it works, and this is why they're separate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and a big thing about that with adult animation is the fact that, in the 70s and 80s, we got G.I. Joe, Transformers, things like that. They were crap. They were bad. They were designed to sell toys to kids.
Yeah, and you kind of got a drop off of what was adult animation at the time too, because Flintstones had started in the 60s.
I think maybe around there, maybe beforehand,
or maybe after.
Yeah.
I know early episodes were in black and white, but with like the Simpsons and stuff like that, or not the Simpsons, Flintstones, with stuff like that, those would be primetime cartoons. And the Jetsons and
exactly. But the contrast you get is that since you're appealing to adults, you have to be careful with how you present the quality, because adults are used to seeing this kind of stuff. They've been exposed to the media as they grew up. Even if it wasn't particular animation, they know how stories are supposed to flow. They know what grabs them. They've developed that palette.
Yeah.
So you don't really get a whole lot of that in successful shows with adult animation when you can get it with children's animation. And this is another defining aspect between the difference of general entertainment versus kids' entertainment versus adults' entertainment. The quality, the graph of quality,
yeah.
has to take an upturn, at least in some of the aspects of what's presented, in order for it to be successful. Because there's tons of kids shows that are high quality.
Yeah.
Adventure Time, Fairly Odd Parents, SpongeBob. So many stuff from when we were younger that I can't even pull out of my head now. Ed and Eddie, yeah, the whole cartoon aspect. Cow and Chicken, Dexter's Laboratory, Johnny Bravo, Powerpuff Girls.
We already said for that.
We had a whole lot of those that were high on the curve, but there was quite a bit of it that was successful and presented that was very low quality. When you get up the scale, there's not going to be a whole lot that's successful in quality these days that's gone past like a few seasons in the terms of adult entertainment. Exactly. I mean, look at Sit Down, Shut Up, the American animated remake of the live-action Australian series, which was supposed to be part of Fox's animation domination back when it was just The Simpsons and Seth MacFarlane stuff.
Yeah.
They were hoping it would break the pause, but it was bad, and people didn't watch because it was bad.
Yeah. Simpsons, Seth MacFarlane, and Mike Judge.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So I guess to really end this off, I got to ask, especially with the proliferation of, they're now doing a new animation domination on Saturdays, which has shows like Axe Cop, have shorter cartoons on there, which I still haven't watched. Axe Cop.
Axe Cop is not going to be genre defined. It's dumb, but it's fun. So it's watered down, but it's watered down in a really good way.
Okay.
I love it, but it's not deep.
Yeah, you have the new
brought it up, right? It was a Axe Cop.
Yeah, I know about the origin from
Yeah.
him and his 5-year-old son, I think.
Yeah, but we have a lot of newer cartoons nowadays, especially one that two that we both love by the same company, Bob's Burgers and Archer.
Yeah, it's had the same voice actor too.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah.
That we're coming to this aspect where animation is becoming a defined and accepted aspect of adult entertainment. That isn't, this is the one show that breaks the rule. These are the 3 shows that break the rule. It's becoming a genre and in many ways an industry in and of its own. You have a lot of people trying to throw something together to get in on the game, but you have a lot of other people taking more chances on things that haven't worked in the past because people are starting to accept it.
There's something that we didn't really touch on, which I just thought about. Something else that we got towards the late 90s and going into the early 2000s is another media had popped up, the internet.
Exactly.
And on the internet, this is where it's famous discussion where the watcher now became the creator.
Yeah.
And with this, you got a lot of stuff that is just adult cartoons just because that's what people wanted to make. And you got a lot of interesting stuff from that. You got, what's that one I hated? Salad Fingers. I really hated Salad
Annoying
Fingers.
Orange.
Annoying Orange. Take or leave it.
Well, but the point is, though, it was produced on the internet, and it got so popular that I'm surprised Fred hasn't gotten his own show, or PewDiePie.
Fred has his own show.
Fred does have his own show.
I'm glad that I didn't know it was a thing, and now I'm
Actually,
depressed.
I don't think it was a show. I think it was just like a movie.
Okay.
No,
Yeah,
he had
Fred
a
did
show
get a
for
movie. I
little
didn't
bit,
know
but
that.
I think they canceled it. I know he did have a movie, though, too.
Okay.
Chris Crocker was going to get his own show.
Yeah.
He turned it down because they said it was going to be censored or some crap like that. So,
But I was going to say the other big one was, two big ones. You have Happy Tree Friends, which had a lot of violence, and Foamy the Squirrel.
yeah.
Those were 2 other big ones. And Foamy the Squirrel was the help.
Well, I mean, these both predated YouTube, too.
Yeah.
I remember seeing both of these back in middle school, back when you had to,
Back on Newgrounds.
Yeah, Newgrounds or ebombsworld.net, where you had to, go to a specific site that hosted its own videos.
Yeah.
To find it. And this is one of the really cool things about the internet, is that the way we approach media is changing.
Yeah, I remember people talking, back then. I would see comments online like, "Well, this is just dumb Flash animation. It's never going to go anywhere." But 3 of the biggest shows
They were
nowadays,
wrong!
3 of the biggest shows nowadays, Bob's Burgers, Archer, and My Little Pony, are all done in Flash animation.
Exactly. And it changes it because it's not about the tools you have. This is one of the greatest things about the internet is you can learn how to use anything, and you can learn it in an afternoon if you're dedicated enough. And it's about what you are willing to do with it.
Yeah.
That changes it. And a lot of the new adult animation shows, they're going to be coming from the internet. I mean, we already got Axe Cop, which got on the internet in the form of a comic book.
Yeah.
That became so successful that they turned it into an adult show.
Yeah, definitely.
Bravest Warriors is an internet-only cartoon that is really popular because it's from the same guy who made Adventure Time.
Being Puppy Cat is hopefully premiering soon.
Yeah. What else that I just saw on Netflix the other day? That was
what was that one you're talking about? Rick and Morty?
Yeah, Rick and Morty. The dude Dan Harmon. Dan Harmon. It's for Adult Swim, actually.
Yeah.
This is the guy we know for making Community, a live action show that has a firm grasp on what surrealism is, and loves to play with it.
Yeah.
Now he's making a cartoon, and you would think that would sort of lose some of the aspects of quality, but it's not, because he knows how to direct the humor.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be really good in the world of adult animation.
So I was gonna ask to kind of end it off.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably gonna ask this question on a lot of podcasts.
Okay.
Especially with subjects like this. Do you think we've hit a peak or do you think we're still growing?
No,
in
we're
the
still
adult
growing,
cartoon?
man. I think that's obvious from the fact that it's been 10 years now since Family Guy got canceled and then was rejuvenated by DVD sales alone.
Yeah.
And that was the curve. That's what set animation
You
domination.
say that though, but the same thing happened to Futurama, and it got canceled / it ended.
Yeah.
So you could make an argument that it might have reached its peak and it might be falling again.
No, it's not falling, man.
Yeah,
Animation
but I
domination
don't
is
agree.
becoming a
I don't
huge
agree
thing.
either. I'm just playing devil's
Okay.
advocate.
No, I got you. I'm just saying I don't agree because the landscape is changing.
Yeah.
The way we approach what adults are, and this is a big thing of adult animation because it attacks our idea of what adults are allowed to enjoy
Yeah.
versus what adults are willing to enjoy.
Yeah, like it's changed from the 80s to today.
Exactly.
In 30 years, a kid's show was what you watched on Saturday morning.
Yeah. Now I think it's going to get weirder before
Yeah.
it starts getting better. But I don't think we're anywhere near a peak. No.
Yeah. No, we'll know when we're near a
This
peak.
is going to be the point, now that it's acceptable, this is going to be the point where every studio just starts throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks.
And we already kind of got that.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of Futurama, or not, I'm a huge fan of Futurama. I'm not a big fan of Family Guy.
Mhm.
But especially when they returned.
Yeah.
After they returned,
Yeah.
I considered it not very good. But one of one of my favorite things about when they returned is the very first episode of the return. They had the first segment be they listed off all the shows that were canceled between when it was originally canceled and when it came back.
Yeah.
And you can already kind of see from that a lot of stuff that they threw at the wall and didn't stick.
Exactly.
And I think I will agree that we have not hit peak, but I will say that based on what you said, we might be coming a little closer to it.
Oh,
because you're
definitely.
saying because we talked about how they're kind of throwing stuff at the wall and see what sticks. They're already kind of starting that because I don't know if you remember this. There was supposed to be a cartoon for Napoleon Dynamite,
Mm-hmm.
which came out and failed.
Yeah, thankfully. Did you ever watch any of it?
Nope,
It was bad.
I figured it would be.
There was actually a really good show hiding underneath it, but they were too busy.
It was too busy being Napoleon Dynamite.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and this is the biggest issue with asking if we've hit a peak or not, because I don't believe we have, and I trust the quality of what true artists are going to bring forward.
Yeah.
But it's possible that a peak could happen tomorrow,
Yeah.
because it's a very unstable genre right now, because it's still in the middle of defining what's acceptable.
Yeah, especially with we hit a point a while ago when the internet really started coming to prominence that we got a lot of new innovations coming at the exact same time.
Exactly.
Because when the internet came around, you started getting a lot of shows being made with Macromedia Flash, which is now Adobe Flash.
Yes.
And you got new ways to just put stuff together. You got new programs that are dedicated only to like doing stuff like this.
Yeah.
And a lot of these things came in the last 20 years. Whereas the 80 years beforehand, there had been a handful of innovations when it came to animation.
Yeah, I mean, there was rotoscoping, and then there was light boards,
Then there were cells, there
and
was
exactly.
animation cells, but then and like from the 1990s, from early 1990s to now, you have a ton of stuff that just came in.
Exactly.
So I think we're still reeling from the fact that we got just all this new
All these
technology.
options.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
And it's
think
it's overwhelming.
yeah, I think once everything is settled, and once we stop evolving, which will never happen, but once we kind of reach an area where we can kind of figure out what can and can't be done, and what is successful and what isn't successful, that is where we will hit the peak.
Exactly. Well, and that's where it'll kind of start to, the landscape will stop being so rocky and
Yeah,
it'll stop terraforming.
yeah,
And we'll be able to see clearly what we're looking at.
yeah. We won't see a new like block of television being made every other week.
I think once we hit that peak, once the business becomes defined, it won't be an aspect where they'll be like,
And-
okay, we're going to take a chance on this because it's a real big thing online.
Which
They'll
by the
start
way,
to trust.
we're not
artists that have been in business.
we're not talking about hitting a peak being a good thing.
Yeah,
Hitting a peak would be a bad thing because that means we've hit the top of where we'll
the stride for our generation.
and then all is downhill. No, we like the period we're in.
Oh, definitely.
The period of adult animation for a general audience is fantastic.
Now, to be fair, once we hit that peak, we could plateau, which is not
Yeah.
a bad thing. That's a fair bargain to get.
Yeah.
And that means that we'll have a steady business, but that's a business where they're going to start, once again, putting more faith into the artists and the businesses that they know have produced quality in the past. They'll stop taking risks on new artists, I think. Unless they have something that really shows that they've got the credentials.
Yeah.
But no, I think the peak is I hope at least a decade off.
Yeah.
I'm really hoping more, but I'd say at least a decade off.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
All right.
All right. So, I've been Zach.
I've been Evan.
And thanks for watching us on our first video podcast.
See you guys next time.
I hope we didn't do too badly, and we'll probably do more of these in the future. Maybe not in this exact setting, but
we're gonna throw some stuff at the wall and see what sticks.
yeah.
All right, guys, have a good one.
Back to your tunes. That is music. Too stupid. Back to your tunes. That is music. Cartoon. That is music.
Johnny